I was 21 when this happened, back in 2017. At the time, I was working part-time at a gas station a few towns over from where I lived. It was one of those jobs I only planned to keep for a few months, just until I figured out what I wanted to do next in my life. I was living with my parents back then, trying to save up some money to buy a decent used car, and maybe move into an apartment with some friends. The shifts at the gas station were usually pretty easy though. A lot of my time was spent ringing up snacks, cigarettes, and soda, much more than the occasional person paying for gas in cash. During the day, the job was a little annoying but completely normal. You had the regulars coming in, the delivery truck drivers, and people just stopping by on their way to work. It was busy enough that the hours flew by. The nights, though, were a completely different story. The nights dragged on forever. The place felt way too bright inside, with those harsh white fluorescent lights humming constantly, and it was way too dark outside. It felt like the store was a lit-up fishbowl, and anyone hiding in the dark outside could see me perfectly, while I could not see past the glass reflection. Every single customer who walked through the door after 10 o'clock felt just a little bit stranger than the last. That night, I was working the closing shift entirely by myself, and it is something I still think about all the time. The store was scheduled to close at midnight. Around 9 or 10 at night, the landline phone on the counter started ringing. It was one of those old, dusty black landline phones mounted on the wall behind the register, the kind that had a really loud, obnoxious bell ring that would startle you if the store was quiet. I answered it without thinking much of it, expecting a customer asking about our hours, or if we sold certain brands of cigarettes. But the second I picked up the receiver and held it to my ear, I heard this incredibly weird voice on the other end. It was low, raspy, and drawn out, like someone trying to sound like a classic killer in a horror movie. Honestly, it reminded me right away of the ghost-face character from the movie Scream. It sounded really forced, like someone trying to do an impression, but even so, it was still very unsettling to hear in an empty store. The voice slowly asked me if I was all alone in the building. I just stayed quiet for a second, trying to process it, and then I said something sarcastic like, "Yeah, you got me," and hung up. I figured it had to be one of my friends messing with me. I immediately texted our group chat and asked which one of them was calling the store pretending to be a serial killer. They all found it funny and acted completely confused at first. Tyler texted back a laughing emoji and said, "Bro, I am literally in the middle of a raid on World of Warcraft. I do not have time to call your work." Then Marcus chimed in, saying he was sitting at the dinner table with his parents and could not even talk on the phone if he wanted to. I assumed they were just lying to me, because that would have been the obvious response if they wanted to keep the prank going. About 10 minutes later, the phone rang again. It was that same fake horror movie voice. This time they asked why I hung up on them. I once again sarcastically said, "All right, you got me, very funny," but the voice let out this soft laugh that sounded weirdly real, not playful or joking like I expected. Then the caller said, "I shouldn't be rude to people who know exactly where I am." I hung up again, but this time I felt a little off. It was probably still a joke, but there was something about how calm and cold the person sounded that really got to me. I kept trying to shake it off. Customers were still coming in at that point, which was enough to keep me distracted. People were getting gas, buying beer, and getting lottery tickets. But every time the crowd slowed down, I found myself staring at the phone. It rang a third time around 10:40. I answered it, and I immediately regretted doing so. The voice asked if the store always got this quiet this late at night. That got under my skin more than I want to admit. I said nothing and hung up. After that, I texted my friends again, this time much more seriously. I told them the joke was getting old and asked who was doing it. Again, they all denied it. I started messaging them one by one. It was the same thing. One was with his girlfriend. One sent me a live picture from his basement. One was apparently at a friend's house almost half an hour away. At that point, I started getting annoyed instead of scared. I thought maybe they had someone else call. But the truth was, even though the caller never said my name, he was saying things that matched what was happening in the store, like how quiet it was. Around 11, the calls started coming closer together. I stopped answering after the fifth one. The phone would ring, and I would just stare at it and let it stop on its own, but then a minute or two later it would ring again. That went on for maybe 15 minutes. I started checking the security cameras more. There were a few around the outside of the building and a few inside. The store sat by itself off a 2-lane road that got pretty dead at night. There was a small patch of woods behind one side of the building, and an alleyway area where the dumpster was. The outside cameras were not great. They had major blind spots, and the picture at night was grainy and dark. Still, I kept flipping through them, half expecting to catch one of my idiot friends crouched outside laughing. I did not see anyone though. Then I started hearing little sounds outside, which at first I told myself was just the wind. For example, there was a tap somewhere on the glass, then what sounded like a light scrape near the side wall, then a noise by the back door that sounded like someone stepping on loose gravel. It got to a point where I could not dismiss it any longer. I texted the group chat again and told them to seriously stop. I even sent a picture of the empty store and wrote that this was not funny anymore. They kept denying it. One of my friends actually called me from his normal number, and I told him what was happening. He sounded genuinely confused and said he was not joking, nor was he involved in any joke. He told me to lock the door early if I had to. I did not want to do that unless I really felt I needed to. Part of me still thought I was making too much of a deal out of nothing. At around 11:40, one last customer came in. I remember the exact sound of the door opening because it made me jump. I looked up and saw just a regular-looking guy at first, maybe in his late 20s or early 30s. There was nothing outwardly crazy about him. He was not dirty, and he was not dressed weirdly. He just had this completely blank expression on his face. He did not say hello. He just walked in and started moving slowly through the aisles. I watched him on the cameras while pretending not to. He took way too long for someone who ended up buying just one single bag of chips. He kept drifting to different aisles and then stopping. More than once, I saw the top half of his face appear above the shelves while he looked toward the counter. It was not in a casual way either. I felt like he was checking on me, monitoring where I was standing. I kept thinking maybe he was high, or maybe he was tired, or maybe he was deciding what he wanted, but my stomach had that heavy feeling by then. Like my body already knew something was wrong before my brain wanted to admit it. He was in there for at least 8 or 9 minutes. Then he finally came up to the counter with a bag of potato chips. He still did not say a word, so I did not say anything either. I just took the chips and scanned them. When I looked down at the register, everything felt completely normal for one brief second. Then I looked up and caught him staring directly into my eyes. He held his gaze for maybe 2 seconds. It does not sound very long, but in that moment it was. There was absolutely no expression on his face when he did it. Then he looked down and paid. I handed him back the bag, and he turned and walked toward the door. I remember thinking maybe I was overreacting. Maybe he was just a weird guy. But right as he got to the door and pushed it halfway open, he stopped and turned his head back toward me without fully turning his body. His chin was slightly lowered, so his eyes had to look up at me from under his brow. Then he smiled. It looked like he knew exactly how creepy he looked, and he was doing it entirely on purpose. It made every single hair on my body stand up. Then he stepped outside, and instead of walking toward any of the gas pumps, or toward a car, he walked around the side of the building. When he did it, he kept his eyes locked on me through the glass windows. He kept that horrible smile, too. I just stood there watching him until the angle of the wall cut him off. Then, I rushed to the camera monitor and followed his movement there. I saw him round the building and head toward the side where the woods were. Then he disappeared into the blind spot behind the building. He did not come back out. I waited maybe 10 seconds, then 20, then a full minute. He never reappeared. That was enough for me to lock the front door early, even though it was a little before midnight. This part might sound dramatic, but I texted my family and my friends and told them that there was a creepy guy outside, and I was not joking anymore. I told them if I stopped replying, that meant something probably happened to me because of him. I rushed through the closing duties as fast as I possibly could. I barely cleaned anything. I did not sweep, I did not mop, and I left the trash in the cans. I kept checking the cameras over and over, expecting to see him pop back out. Nothing. Midnight hit, and I decided I could not stay there a second longer. I grabbed my stuff, turned off what I needed to turn off, and went to the front door. I unlocked it and stepped out into the cold night air. That moment of having to turn around and relock the door from the outside was so tense. I felt like I could not have done it quick enough. Once I did, I took off running toward my car. It was parked off to the side of the building. I got most of the way there, and just as I reached it and slowed down for half a second to grab my keys, I heard fast footsteps. It was not running, but it was worse somehow, like fast speed-walking steps slapping loudly against the pavement in front of the store. I turned around and saw him. It was that guy. He had come from the front corner of the building and was moving toward me and my car incredibly fast. I yanked my car door open and threw myself inside. I locked the door and started the engine so fast I almost flooded it. The second the car started, I slammed it into reverse and peeled out of that parking lot. I looked once in the rearview mirror and saw him standing there in the headlights, just watching me leave. The whole drive home, I was sending voice texts and regular texts to everyone, saying I was right, that I knew he was going to come out of nowhere. None of that was a prank anymore. The next day, I texted my boss and told him exactly what happened. I told him I was not doing overnight shifts anymore. He looked at the footage later, and his response honestly made me even angrier. He got kind of defensive and said the guy looked like a regular customer to him. He said maybe I had just gotten spooked because of the phone calls and connected things that were not actually connected. That pissed me off more than I can explain. I was the one who was actually there. I was the one getting the calls. I was the one who saw that guy disappear around the building and come speed-walking at me out of nowhere when I left. I did not care if the footage did not fully capture how it felt, because I knew what happened. I quit right after that. I did not even argue much. I just told him if he thought that was normal, he could work the closing shift himself. I entered that job with an attitude, and I was proud of leaving it. Even now, many years later, I still think the caller and that guy who came in were the exact same person, even if I can never prove it. Now let us move on to another story that took place at a different kind of night shift. My name is Cadence, and I work the closing shift at a small dive bar in the quieter part of my town. The place is located right off the highway, but the parking lot also has a back entrance that is available to the general town. It is nothing fancy, just a dimly lit spot where the regulars know each other by name, and the jukebox has been playing the same rotation of classic rock for years. Most of our customers are locals, truckers passing through, and the occasional lost tourist looking for a stiff drink. I like it though. The routine is very predictable, the tips are surprisingly decent, and I have learned over time how to handle the usual bar crowd. You get the talkers, the flirtatious ones, the quiet drinkers, and the ones who just want to be left alone. Weekends are obviously a lot more hectic. But the thing about working during the week is that I am expected to work my night shifts entirely alone. I do not even get a bar back to pop in now and again. Yeah, it is obviously easier work and slower during the week, but I miss the company of my coworkers. I tend to be pretty vigilant during my shifts because we do get the occasional bar fight, considering the kinds of crowds we attract. That is why I clocked the guy immediately. It was sometime after 1 in the morning on a Tuesday when he walked in. If I had to guess, I would say he was in his late 40s, but he was extremely clean-cut and well-groomed. He did not have the kind of look you would expect from a guy his age in an area like this. He was wearing a black turtleneck underneath a black trench coat. He was definitely well-dressed, but casual about it. I am not sure how to explain it, but he had this aura of sophistication about him that makes you think of money. Real money, not the loud look-at-me kind. He glanced around slowly before walking swiftly over to the bar and taking a seat. I also remember him having oddly good posture, but that is neither here nor there. When I walked over, he glanced at the bottles behind me and ordered something top shelf without hesitation. As I was pouring his drink, he asked me if I liked working here, with a polite smile on his face. It was a normal enough question, so I answered him honestly. I told him yeah and smiled back. I then made a joke about being a bartender or something. I wish I could say I got a creepy vibe from him, but that was not the energy he was giving off at all. He genuinely seemed like a stand-up guy, kind of like the single dad at his kid's baseball game, who gives the whole team a high five. He chatted with me for a bit, which I did not mind, since the bar was pretty quiet at that point. Eventually, he asked me if I ever thought about doing something bigger with my life, which I admit was somewhat bizarre. Again though, it was not a totally creepy question given the nature of the situation. I gave him my standard bartender smile and told him I was happy for now. He nodded and sipped his drink, seemingly disappointed at my answer for reasons I did not understand. After a long pause, he asked me what time I got off out of nowhere. That question surprised me. I had not picked up any kind of flirting from him whatsoever, so I was a little disappointed to discover that our conversation had just been another one of those empty attempts at getting my number. I smiled and gave him a vague answer, trying to brush him off in a friendly way without seeming uptight. Before he could answer, I busied myself and began wiping down the counter, but he did not press. He just smiled like he already knew. Then he drained his drink and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, laying it gently on the bar like it was nothing. Then, without another word, he walked out into the night. I did not really know what to make of the encounter. I know it sounds like nothing, but his demeanor was just so far off my radar that I was intrigued. Either way, I figured I was never going to see him again and got on with my life. As it would turn out, though, I was dead wrong. About a week later, he came back. Only this time he was not alone. There was a woman with him. She drew my attention immediately since I had never seen her before. She looked like she was in her mid-30s and was dressed in a way that did not quite match her age. It was trendy but off, like someone trying a little too hard to blend in with a much younger crowd. I watched her closely as the two of them approached the bar. Everything about her seemed calculated, from the way she smiled too easily to the way she leaned against the bar like we were already close friends. As I was setting down napkins in front of them, the very first thing she said to me was not a hello or a drink order, but a direct compliment. She put on this overly joyful smile and said, "You are so pretty." Her fingers brushed against my arm as she said it, lingering just a second longer than normal. I laughed and thanked her, but I could instantly tell that something was off about this woman. The man did not speak, which I thought was also a little strange, given that he had been so talkative the last time he was here. They ordered drinks, and I poured them, and that is when the questions came flooding in. The woman asked me how long I had been working here, along with how old I was, and a bunch of other small talk questions like that. I answered in short, polite sentences, but I got the strong sense that this was not just casual small talk. She was studying me. At one point, she looked over at the man, and it seemed like they were communicating despite not speaking a single word. She looked back at me and told me that she ran an exclusive event club. She leaned in a bit as she said it, lowering her voice, as if to prevent her from being overheard by another patron. She told me that she is always looking for young, fun people for private parties, and that I would make an absolute killing. 10 grand for a single weekend. I let out a small, forced laugh and told her it sounded a bit too good to be true. She insisted that it was real, and told me that a bunch of girls just like me worked for them. Her smile never faltered at any moment, which was starting to seriously creep me out. She steered the conversation right back to the job, circling around the same words. Fun, safe, exclusive. Then casually she said, "You should step outside for just a second. There is someone out there who can explain it much better." My pulse kicked up instantly. I was not playing around at that point. I did not even bother pretending like I was not creeped out. "I am good," I said in a firm voice. There was no smile on my face this time. Just then a group of customers walked in, laughing and talking loudly. The woman's expression changed in an instant, her friendly mask slipping just slightly before she turned to the man beside her. Without another word, they both stood up and left. I would be lying if I said I was not unsettled after that. Those random people had just propositioned me for God knows what. I told my coworkers and my boss about the entire situation, and we all agreed to keep an eye out should those people ever return. My boss assured me that he was always a 15-minute drive away should I need him, and the bar security cameras were typically enough to deter any bad behavior. There was not really much I could do beyond that. It was not like those people had done anything illegal yet. I tried to push it out of my head, but a few nights later, after closing, I saw the car. It was parked directly across the street, engine turned off, just sitting there in the dark. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, but the feeling of being watched crawled over my skin like static electricity. As I walked to my car, I kept my head down, my keys clutched tightly in my hand. When I pulled out of the lot, I checked my mirrors. The car followed. It stayed back just enough to avoid looking too suspicious, but every turn I made, it was still right there behind me. I took a random turn onto a side street and it followed, still there. I started completely freaking out internally. I knew it was them. I forced myself to stay calm and to think. Then, without hesitating, I navigated and pulled directly into the parking lot of a police station, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles practically turned white. The second I pulled into the precinct, the car sped off into the night. Nothing happened after that for a while, but I knew deep down it was not over. It turned out I was right. It was a very slow weekday shift, barely anyone coming into the bar. By midnight, I was wiping down the counter, half thinking about closing early, when the front door creaked open. It was the woman. I immediately sent my boss a text message as inconspicuously as I possibly could. I looked back up, and the woman was staring at me with that exact same artificial smile. She walked slowly to the bar and sat down with her hands folded neatly. I was debating just telling her to leave when she said, "Thought I would come check on you." My stomach started twisting, but I did my best to hide my fear. I told her we were about to close and that she had to leave, but she made this pouty face and asked for just one old-fashioned. I thought about denying her, but I figured pouring the drink would stall her long enough for my boss to arrive. So I turned around and got started, trying to keep my cool. And then I heard it, the soft, unmistakable click of the front door shutting. I whipped around. The woman was completely gone. I felt this awful heavy pit in my stomach as I stepped toward the entrance. Through the glass doors I saw it, a black van idling just outside. Without thinking, I locked the front door as quickly as I could, but then I heard metal rattling from the back door. Someone was trying to get in. I did not think. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, which was a metal cocktail shaker, and clutched it like a weapon as I dialed 911 with my other hand. There was no way the police would get there in time, so I thought about making a run for it out the front door, but I did not for whatever reason. I was bracing myself for a fight when I saw headlights pulling into the lot. It was my boss. The sounds on the back door suddenly stopped, and a few seconds later the black van pulled out of the parking lot with a loud screech of the tires. I embraced my boss and told him what had happened, and he said he had gotten the license plate of the van as it was leaving. When the police arrived, my boss reviewed the security footage with them. It was so much worse than I had imagined. Just before the woman left, the cameras had captured two masked figures, crouching near the front door, waiting. There was another person in the back, who was banging on the door with his fist, clearly trying to flush me out to the front where the masked men were waiting. It was downright horrifying. To make matters worse, the plate number my boss had caught turned out to be completely unregistered. It has been quite a while since this incident, but no progress has been made. The only good news to come out of the whole thing is that my boss does not make me work alone anymore. Despite that, I am still extremely uneasy anytime I am scheduled for a night shift. I still question how they knew I would be working alone. It does not make any sense. Even now, I often think about what would have happened had I given into my fear and run straight out the front door. Let us transition to another chilling occurrence that took place late at night, this time back at a gas station. I used to work the night shift at a gas station and convenience store, off a quiet stretch of highway. I say used to, because after what happened to me a few months ago, I will absolutely never work a night shift again. It is a small station, the kind that barely gets any business once it gets late. Most of my shift was spent restocking shelves, wiping down the counters, and occasionally ringing up a trucker or a traveler passing through. I remember the whole thing vividly. It was just past 2:30 in the morning. By then, even the truckers had mostly dried up, and I was left with basically nothing to do. I scrolled mindlessly on my phone, trying to kill some time. At one point, I stepped outside for some fresh air, rubbing my hands together against the freezing cold. I exhaled a few times, watching my breath disappear into the dark air. The parking lot was empty, just the pumps, the empty road, and the dark stretch of trees beyond. The neon sign flickered faintly, and I remember it being hazy out, like you could literally see the moisture hanging in the air. Even with the highway not too far off, it was pretty silent out there. Right as I was about to walk back toward the store, I noticed something move out of the corner of my eye. I whipped my head around and realized there was a person standing behind one of the pumps. How had I not noticed him earlier? He was wearing a dark red hoodie with the hood pulled up, and he had both hands shoved deep into his pockets. There was not a car in sight, so he obviously was not fueling up. The only thing was, he did not seem to be heading toward the store either. He was just standing there, half turned toward the building like he was watching me. At first, I figured maybe he was waiting for someone, but something about the way he moved rubbed me the wrong way. He was kind of shuffling about in this slow circular pattern. I entered the store, but made sure to keep an eye on him through the glass. I kept track of him while pretending not to, hoping someone would drive up and pick him up or something. But after a few minutes, he started walking toward the door, slow at first, then suddenly pushing inside like he had made up his mind all at once. He walked up to the counter but did not say anything right away. He just stared at me like he was sizing me up. Then, in a rushed, almost rehearsed way, he muttered that his car had broken down just before the pumps. He said he needed a jump, or maybe just a little gas to get to the next town. I was literally shocked. He was not even trying to make his story believable. Like I could not believe he actually expected me to buy his nonsense story. I offered to call a tow truck instead. No, he said too quickly, shaking his head. He said he just needed a flashlight, and maybe some help checking under the hood. Something was definitely off. That much was true. The way he spoke, the way he watched my reaction, it felt like a test. To be fair though, people walking into gas stations at that hour are usually a little strange, and I started wondering whether he actually needed help and was just an odd person, or maybe on something. I asked him where his car was parked, and he told me it was just beyond the highway entrance. I was obviously skeptical, but then he pointed at the monitor behind me. I turned to look at the screen, and to my surprise, there actually was a car parked out there. I thought to myself, oh crap, maybe this guy really does need help. And that is when the truth hit me. I had literally just been outside, and I knew I would have remembered a car parked out there. I glanced back at the monitor and saw the slightest movement near the car's back bumper. Someone was crouching just out of view. A cold wave of dread hit me. I forced a casual smile and agreed to help the guy, but not before telling him I needed to grab my phone from the back office. I turned slowly, not wanting to spook him, but the second I was out of his direct line of sight, I slammed my hand onto the emergency panic button under the counter. The alarm went off instantly, screeching through the store. I expected him to attack me, but what he did instead was even more unsettling. His nervous energy completely disappeared. No more fake urgency, no more shifting from foot to foot. He actually relaxed. His whole body language shifted, and then he smiled. It was not a panic smile, and it was not an embarrassed one either. It was a slow, knowing grin, like he had all the time in the world. Like this was deeply amusing to him. I was in complete shock. I did not even have time to get physical with him. In one fluid motion, he turned and bolted out the door. I ran to the monitors just in time to see both of them take off. They did not run toward the car, but instead they ran straight into the woods behind the station. The car just sat there, engine off, headlights off, with no one inside. By the time the police arrived, it was exactly as I saw it. The car was still there, but the men were gone. There were no footprints leading away, and no sign of them anywhere. And then one of the officers pointed something out, something I had not noticed before. The front passenger door was wide open. There had been a third person inside the car the whole time. The police took my statement down. I turned over the surveillance footage, and that was that. A few days later, they followed up with me. They had the car towed and ran the plates. It turned out it had been reported stolen nearly a week earlier, over 100 miles away. No one had come forward to claim it. There were no reports of missing persons, and no other crimes linked to it. Just an abandoned vehicle in the middle of nowhere, with absolutely no explanation. That was months ago, and still nothing. I do not know why convenience stores are such popular targets, but I can say for sure that I will never work another night shift again. And finally, we have one last story that highlights just how dangerous working late at night can be. Even in a place as large and seemingly safe as a major department store. This happened a couple of weeks ago. I work the night shift at Walmart. It is not the worst job in the world, but after a while it starts to feel like you are just floating through time. The nights blend together. Same shelves, same routine, same dull hum of the overhead lights. Hopefully something better comes along. I usually hang out in and stock the electronics section, which is nice because it is much quieter than the other areas. People do not exactly come rushing in at 2 in the morning. to buy phone chargers and Bluetooth speakers. Most of the customers are either night owls killing time or truckers grabbing last-minute supplies before heading back on the road. That is why I noticed him. At first, I did not think much of it, just another guy wandering the aisles, probably waiting for someone. But after a few minutes, I realized he was not shopping. He was not even pretending to. He just kept appearing. Every time I glanced up, he was lingering nearby, hovering in the next aisle over, or standing a little too still by the clearance section. He was not looking at any products. He was just standing there watching me. I told myself I was overthinking it. The store is big, and maybe he was just taking his time. But the way he moved, always just close enough for me to notice, never actually picking anything up, it set something deep in my gut on edge. I was waiting for him to just get on with it and ask for my number, but he never approached me. It was like he wanted me to see him, which did not make any sense to me. I went to radio someone about it, but realized that the batteries in my radio must have been dead because it was not working. Eventually, I started debating whether I should go find a manager when I felt a hand wrap around my arm. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but before I could react, a woman's voice rang out loud, friendly and overly familiar. She exclaimed, "There you are," before going on a little spiel about how she had been looking all over for me. I turned, completely thrown off, and saw a woman I had never seen before in my life. She was smiling, her grip firm on my arm, like we were old friends reuniting. Before I could say anything, she leaned in and whispered, her tone dropping to something low and urgent. "She told me that guy has been recording you, and to follow her." My stomach dropped. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance back. The man was still there, only now he was not even pretending to browse. He was staring directly at me. A cold wave of fear crept over me. I let her pull me. I did not even question it. The way she grabbed my arm, the way she spoke so loudly and casually, like we were two old friends reuniting, I clung to it. I was beyond grateful that someone had realized what was going on and put herself in an uncomfortable position just to help me. She kept up the act as we walked, rambling about something, maybe a trip she had taken, maybe an inside joke we supposedly shared. I barely processed the words. My thoughts were stuck on him. Had he really been recording me? That was creepy as hell. I wanted to know if he was still following us, but I could not muster the courage to turn around just yet. The woman steered me through the aisles, moving fast. I barely noticed where we were going, only that we were moving, and that the distance between me and that man was growing. In all honesty, I was kind of expecting her to quit the pretending to know me at some point, but she kept it up. At one point, it was getting a little uncomfortable, so I glanced behind me, and to my relief, that man was no longer following. The woman kept pulling me forward, though. I told her that we were good now, and that we should probably go find my manager, but she just squeezed my arm tighter, telling me that he was still lurking somewhere. I thought to myself, so what? What is he going to do in a store full of employees? I was obviously worried at first because no one was around, but now that I was not alone, I started realizing that there was not much of a point in being scared anymore. I told her this, but she continued moving. I told her I was serious and planted my feet, twisting my arm slightly to loosen her grip. "You can let go now," I said, but she did not. She smiled at me, but something in it was off. "Come on, just a little further," she said, basically tugging me at that point. I glanced around. The store was basically dead. We had moved past the registers, past the self-checkout, and past the aisles that saw the most foot traffic. The warehouse section loomed ahead, dimly lit and nearly empty. Beyond that was the side exit, the one without cameras, the one employees used for loading shipments. That is when it dawned on me. She was leading me straight to the exit. I did not think. I screamed for help as I yanked my arm, free of her grasp with all my might. She lost her grip just enough for me to pull free. I did not waste another second. I turned and ran toward the front of the store. As I fled, she yelled out something behind me. She yelled for me to come back, followed by my actual name, which I had never given her. I kept running until I saw one of my coworkers who was running toward me, most likely reacting to my screaming. I told him to call security, which he promptly did. That woman was long gone, though. By the time I told my story to the security guards, that woman and that man were nowhere in sight. They reviewed the security footage, and just as I suspected, the woman and the man walked into the store together. She had been with him the entire time. The man's face was clear as day in one of the frames, but hers was always turned away. I had a feeling she was the mastermind behind the whole thing, so I was infuriated that the cameras had not picked her face up. Every second of it had been planned. The police got involved, and the whole thing went down as a failed abduction attempt. I am still waiting for a resolution about it. That man should definitely be easy to track down, given his face was caught on camera. I have no idea how that woman knew my name. That is what terrifies me the most. Those people had not just picked me at random. I was a direct, calculated target. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments, and remember, we have a whole playlist of true crime episodes ready for you to binge right now. Until next time, see ya.